All right, so the first thing we're going to do today is look at the um, biblical basis for what we do. And I'm going to start with John chapter 4, where Jesus meets a woman at a well. Let's see if I can get a picture here. So Jacob's well is the Starbucks of his culture. So he deliberately goes to a place where people will gather. And this is what I'm wanting you to think about. If I'm going to do cross-cultural ministry, one, I've got to be prepared to step out of my cultural comfort. I need to be able to step where other people are and where they go. So this is the second thing. Jacob's well was there. Jesus, tired from the journey, sat down by the well. It was about noon, and a Samaritan woman comes to draw water. So he goes at a time where it's not so busy. Okay, notice that. They're at noon. It's not so busy because first thing in the morning, last thing at night, it's busy, busy, busy. Starbucks, first thing in the morning, after school when all the kids are there, busy, busy, busy. But he goes there at a time when there is opportunity now to have a conversation. So like we did with Ryan or before, we were there mid-morning after the rush, and he was sitting there by himself, and we sat at his table and had a conversation. Now, how many times have you gone into a place like Starbucks or a grocery store or another place? You've seen someone by themselves, but you go because you're so busy. So you've got to go intentionally saying, I need to spend time if I'm going to have relationships, right? You don't always get relationship if you're running by people saying hello. It takes time. So notice this biblical basis that we're talking about. Jesus intentionally steps out. He intentionally goes to a place where people are going to be at a time when there's going to be time to build relationship. And now this is the key I want to get across to you today. Okay, I'm not going to go through this whole passage, but just a few steps so that you can get started. He says, will you give me a drink? Now, why is that significant? As a cross-cultural Christian, we come many times thinking we have all the answers. We have the solution. We have the knowledge. And what we need to do is to have a chance to dump it on people. And if we give them all the solution, they'll change their life, they'll get to heaven, and I can go on with my life. You know, we need to do this and give them what we know. But what does Jesus do? He doesn't just dump on them what he knows. He comes from a place of vulnerability. And he says, will you give me a drink? So he finds a place of common need. And he reaches out and says, can you help me? And this is the one thing I want to get across from this passage. Not only putting yourself in a vulnerable place where you're crossing cultures, reaching to a place where you may not be naturally comfortable, but getting to a place where you will say, what does this person have that I can vulnerably reach out to and come from a position of need? Because we come from a position of, I have and you need what I have. So I need to figure out how to give it to you. And that's our position. We come from up top down. But Jesus shows here, come from a position down and reach up. What do I need that I can reach out to them? So, for example, when we were talking with the young man, Ryan, from Tunisia, we didn't know anything on Tunisia. How do you say hello in Tunisian? Language. I don't know their language. This is an issue of need. I need to know how to greet you. So can you help me learn your language? That's a natural. You don't have to pretend. You may not know it. So ask from a position of need. or you can think of other things that you may need at that time. But language is an easy one to use to, I need to know how to say hello in your language. How do you say this? How do you say that? This is great. Or what are some of the things that your people like to eat? What are your favorite foods? What are your favorite ways of doing this? What are some of the best sites? If I were to visit your country, where would I go? These are all things you don't have to prepare for. These people know, they have the information, but by producing a sense of vulnerability, you build a relationship, and then all of a sudden you have a relationship, a dialogue going on back and forth. Then they ask you questions, and you start from that position. So that's all I want to do from this one, because you look here, Samaritan woman says to him, "You're a Jew, I'm a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink?" For Jews do not associate with Samaritans, right? This is not a natural thing. And in verse 27, the disciples return and they're surprised to find him talking to a woman, because normally the men do not talk to the women like this, especially one in his position. He doesn't also talk to Samaritans. So she's surprised that he's willing to cross cultures, cross gender barriers. The disciples are surprised. And this is something that you can do. And that's all I'm saying. I don't want to overload you, but just these small steps. Put yourself intentionally into a position where you may not feel comfortable, but reach out vulnerably with something that you can do. Oh, what country are you from? What's your name? What country are you from? Great to meet you. I've always wondered, I'm wondering, how do I say this in your language? And you've got a connection. Now, I'm going to call up Zulfi, who is going to come up, and he's going to show you another New Testament position for Saul and Ananias on what happened cross-culturally there. And then he's going to tell you a little bit about his culture and some of the differences in culture that you may experience with it. Zulfi, would you come, please? I think what we need to do is make sure you're on the screen and that they can still see this. So there.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, my name is Zulfi, and I actually come from with refugees locally, and especially from the Middle East. So definitely there's refugees from all over the world here. But today, so just before I start, I wanted to ask a question. You can just think in your... Oh, sorry. Yeah, so if you can just think in your mind, maybe I'll take my mask down. Is that better? You can also see my face. So I just want you to think in your mind, when you hear the words Middle East, what comes to your mind? Think for a few seconds. Yes, okay. Terrorist, ISIS, good. Let's continue. Anything else? Muslims, yes. War. Sorry? Desert, yes. Okay, what about the word refugee? Yeah. What words come to your mind? Suffering. Any other words for refugee? Yeah. Death? Homeless. Homeless? That, yeah. Okay, and last one is, what comes to mind when you think of the word Muslim? Cool. Okay. Anything else? Okay. So, yeah, I think this is some things that it's very common in our culture when we think about people from this area of the world. And I know a lot of friends who I know that they think, oh, refugees are a threat, or they could be terrorists and they could be trying to do something in our country, right? But I just wanted to kind of look at it today from what is God's perspective on this issue, right? And so for me, my family is, so I don't know if I would go against terrorists here. If I grew up here, but yeah, So I actually was born, my mom came to faith before I was born. She has an amazing story of how she came to faith. But when I grew up, I had a really strong. So I actually started learning Chinese when I was 12. After school, high school, I went to YWAM. I was in Taiwan for 2.5 years. I went to a lot of places, and I've been to China dozens on different trips. But I used to ask God, how come it made me look like this? It's so hard to go to China with. But it wasn't actually until I was in YWAM and I actually went to Afghanistan and Uzbekistan. And that's when actually everyone thought I was local. And even my name, my full name is Zulfahar, which is actually a pretty orthodox Muslim name. And people started thinking I'm local. I had so much favor. And I was like, oh, maybe God. So that's how I started kind of going towards the Muslim world. And there's some images from that time in Afghanistan that really stuck out to me. We went to a mosque there, which is actually where my name comes from. And when I entered, I don't usually go to a mosque, but I felt to at this time. And I went inside, and there's this huge, like a huge bowl, and it had all these padlocks on it. And there's people who are sitting there, and they're weeping and weeping and weeping at these padlocks. So I asked my friend who was local, and I said, "What is this? Like, what is this?" And he said, "Oh, they believe that if they are sincere enough, that the lock will open and they will receive God's love." And like looking at it, I was just like, it's so sad to think about these people are crying that they would receive God's love, right? And how we take it for granted here. Oh, so that's like an image that comes in my mind. And another time I was in Munich for a conference, and this was just the time when Syrian refugees were starting to come into Europe. And I went to a church, and afterwards I met two refugees who were from Syria. And they had literally walked across from Syria through Turkey, across Europe, and landed in Germany 1 week before I arrived. And so I started talking to them, and I found out the guy's English was really, really good, like perfect. And I'm like, how come your English is so good? He's like, oh, I actually studied English as my major, and I was planning to go to the States. And he said, then the war happened, and I had to flee. I'm here in Germany now, and they don't care if I know English or not. I have to learn German. And he said, my whole world is kind of upended now. And then another phrase he said that kind of got stuck in my head. He said, the only difference, we kind of the same thing. And he said, the only difference between you and me is our passport, right? And that really stuck in my head again. It's so true. Like if I had grown up in that area and I'm here now, like literally it's just that he has this right? And I think that experience really kind of changed my view of refugees because I started seeing them as people rather than statistics. Sometimes you see so many refugees, 100,000, whatever. When you meet the person, you're like, wow, this is the person just like me, right? And so today I kind of wanted to share from Acts 9. So if your Bible, you can turn to it. So this is a story about which we're also quite familiar with. It's the story of Saul and Ananias. And so it's quite funny when I started looking at this with the lens of. So if we look at it, it says, chapter 9, it says, meanwhile, Saul was still reading murderous threats against him. He went to the high priest and others to the synagogue, that if he found any there who belonged to them, whether men or women, he might take them. And of course, he goes to Damascus and then So now let's get now to Ananias. So in verse 10, it says, in Damascus, there was a disciple named Ananias. The Lord called him and said, Ananias. Yes, Lord. The Lord told him, go to the house of Judas on Straight Street. Ask for a man from Tarsus named for his praying. In the vision, he had seen a man named Ananias place his hands on him to the Lord, Ananias answered, I've heard many reports about this man, all the harm he has done to your holy people, Jerusalem. And he has come here with authority from the chief priest to call in your name. But the Lord said to Ananias, go, this man is my I will show him how much he messed up. I think. So let's step back and think about this. Ananias, okay? So we just read Saul is doing all these terrible things. Actually, in modern days, I would say we would call Paul a terrorist. Right? He's basically going and killing people, bringing people into jail, right? And it says he's coming to Damascus. So where does Ananias live? In Damascus. So you hear a terrorist is coming to your city. So what's your first reaction? And that's kind of, I feel like, how some people feel about refugees coming here. Oh, look, there's people coming to our city. But, and he has right to be afraid. People actually are doing harm. I will put a caveat, 99.9% are not. But even if they were, let's see how God looks at this. So Ananias responds with, I can't go to these people, like this is scary. But God has a very different way of looking at it. Let's read that again. In verse 15, it says, the Lord said to Ananias, go, this man is my chosen instrument to proclaim my name to the Gentiles and their king. I will show him how much he must suffer for my name. So think about that. When God is looking at this terrorist, all hasn't changed yet. All is still doing terrible things. But God's view of him is. And I think that's something that I've been continuing to ask God for his heart for the people. When we see the people who are in our midst, are we seeing them as they are, which are broken and in need of Jesus? Or are we seeing them as how they're going to be? Like I work a lot with Muslims and with refugees, and for me, part of the thing that keeps me motivated to keep on doing this is I'm listening to testimonies all the time of Muslims who come to faith. And if you guys want to look for testimonies, there's like a podcast from Voice of the Martyrs, a lot of amazing stories, persecuted countries and people coming to faith and their stories. There's also really good books by a guy named Tom Doyle. Kind of almost like a novel, but they're all stories of Muslims and atheists. So I'm reading these things all the time, listening to them, and I'm trying to learn Middle Eastern languages. I'm watching worship services in those countries, and when I see those people in the screen on YouTube who are worshiping, in my mind, I'm seeing the people I met on the street. One day this person is going to be worshiping Jesus, right? And so I think that really changes my perspective when I'm talking to people. I'm not talking to them as, oh, this is a really hard criminal person. I'm talking to them as, this is someone Jesus loves so much. And one day, God's going to choose them, right? So I think that perspective change is so important in our own hearts. Even before we go and step out to talk to someone, it's asking God to change our own hearts and to receive God's love, right? And when we receive God's love, it's so amazing when I get to talk to refugees. I feel like I'm serving Jesus. Right? It's so beautiful because I get to be part of the story of in their journey with God. Right? So it's such a beautiful thing. I think it's an honor, and I'm so encouraged by all of you guys who are taking that step to say I want to reach out to people around me, because I feel like there's just this morning I was reading in the Bible passage. It was talking about Jesus saying, harvest is plentiful and the laborers are few, right? And I think there are so few laborers who are working in these fields. And in Canada, there's so many people around us. I used to joke with my friends. I said, if you want to work with refugees, you can pick whatever ethnic flavor you want. I can find them for you. You can find them from Iraq, from Syria, from Iran, like wherever you want, right? So I think it's such a
So I hope you're encouraged by that. The only difference between you and someone else may be their passport. And you see them with the same vision that God has for them, not maybe as they are now, but as they can be in the hands of God. But thank you, Zolfi. I appreciate that. And Pastor Joe's going to talk to us about, our first Pastor Mark. Pastor Joe's going to talk about cultural barriers. You've heard some of them that Zolfi explained. So Pastor Mark's going to talk to you now about how do you take a person from complacency to curiosity, and where can you go with that?
I'm a terrible model. I only speak one language. I speak to be able to greet people. But just by saying label, there was a response. You may be laughing because right? But I hope that what it does is it says he respects enough that he tries to learn. Change to generalization because it's not just going to be in what's Francis. And I would love to, probably more than anything, is to be able to sit down and ask them questions. Come on. Oh, thank you. This is Solomon. A very wise man. Or a wise guy, you know. But it would be wonderful to sit down and turn your story. Sophie mentioned the privilege. The privilege it is to be able to walk together in their path of life for a time or a long time. It's the trust. It's the trust that we culturally inappropriate already. I'm Pastor Bueller, and I'm tall. I'm a school teacher, biology, chemistry, in Kenya, teaching international mission school, but then felt I could never get out of my mind that I'm in. So really wanted to connect AIDS orphans, which is still running, children graduating from university. I had an experience like those people. We were in Kenya for the majority of the first multi-party. They were tumultuous affairs, all sorts of violence. One time, our happened just around. As I was an administrator, I had the responsibility with 500 children. So there was all these meetings at night. Okay, hearing, come on down. And as we flew out of Jomo Kenyatta Airport, Nairobi, you could just feel the weight of responsibility falling off. But as soon as I saw that, I said, but my friend, I'm going to give you sort of 2 for 1 here, because only a few of you were here for the first time. And there's no sense trying to get curiosity if you don't have trust. So the nations are coming to Vancouver. How do we effectively engage and share Jesus with them? I mentioned last time that from one source, they said these are the thresholds from distrust to trust. Somewhere along the line, they learned to trust a Christian. And to do that, we've already been practicing that. Zoe has said we need to pray that God would mold our hearts and remove our biases. We can make these PowerPoint available to you. If not today in paper, we can do it. And then learn. Learn greetings. You have to be just a little sensitive because some people, if you say, where are you from? You know that they're from somewhere else. But maybe they were born in Vancouver. They're not from Kinsalander. No, but where are you really from? I'm Canadian. So don't push that too much, but just say, oh, I noticed your name. What would be the origin of your name? That was Sophie this morning. I realized he was born in Canada because it's not so threatening. If you go downtown East Side, which is another cultural, say, how are you? And so you might need to adjust, or some of the Afghanistan will face so much who parents, relations, all there. But be sensitive, be in this genuine posture. Bond. Go to Jacob's Well or Starbucks. Spend some time together. This buddy of mine here, we've spent lots of time in Starbucks.
Yeah.
We've only known each other, what, 5 months, 6 months?
6 months.
6 months, yeah. Affirm. And he's not hard to affirm, neither is he, because they are great guys. And I want to affirm Zophie. Yeah, right on it. Change my heart, oh Lord. Be intentional. Go to someplace. Missions is not a 2-hour mission banquet once a year. Or on a Saturday morning, we go knock on doors. Mission is our life. Go ye into all the world. As you are going into all the world, preach the gospel. I had some fellow recently told me, he came up to me and he said, a number of months ago, I was here, I was not a believer, and you said something to me. Neither of us can remember. But he said, God used that to water the seed in my heart. He's become a Christian, he's baptized, and now he's introducing me to his friend Charlie and saying, Charlie believes he wants to be baptized too. Great. And he said, of course it's okay. It's a great commission. Oh, Andy, you can be in a position where you baptize your friend. Now maybe that goes against established pastoral or practices in Chinese church, I don't know. But it certainly doesn't go against established practices. Learn greetings. 6, lots of them. Fraser, all over, coming right over here. Salam alaikum, namaste. This is what gives it away. The little red dot on the forehead, a puja mark, which would mean someone is from a Hindu background. Someone that I have connected with, come from India, married sponsors, and 2 little children. Hindu background. One of the challenges with Hindus, there's how many million? 300 million different gods. So they may say, I'll accept Jesus, but now there's so you need to, but anyhow, where I was going is that she came to know Christ. She was facing all sorts of demonic pressure for a long time. And she was baptized a couple of weeks ago. Completely delivered. So just self-reflection. Do you have trusting relationships with non-Christians? That's all I need to say. Do you have trusting relationships where they would call you up with a problem, where they would be open to you? So the second part is lots of people can say, oh yeah, I know Solomon, he's a great guy. He's a Christian, but what's good for him is good for him. They need to move to the point where they're curious. And how does one do that? This is a picture of you. I don't know whether you knew.
Pretty handsome, right?
Case study. Many non-Christians are content to have a Christian friend or two, but never get any closer to the kingdom.
Yeah.
And they'll quite likely, they'll like it. Oh, this guy's a nice guy. He's generous, he's friendly, he'll swear, hopefully. But that's as far as they go. So how do we overcome tolerance and complacency? 3 things. Provoke curiosity. Curiosity blooms in 3 stages. Awareness. Tomorrow in church is going to be somebody that's coming to speak about creation. And if people come and they say, well, I always believe in evolution. This is it starts to change. I've mentioned before, it starts to change when the narrative in the news that all Christians are Islamophobic, homophobic, whatever, and you say, not many Muslims. So you start their personal experience, their box for Christians is no longer big enough to fit the examples, the realities they know. Curiosity, committing to a friendship. Boy, I didn't think I'd ever be a friend of a Christian. But they start to see this person lives different. I wonder what it is. And when crises hit, either in their life or my life, that's quite often people met a fellow that is, I don't know what he is, Eastern philosophy or whatever, but we've known each other, we've coffee together. And he came over, he delivered me a whole bunch of bottles. I collect 3 cycles, get the money. He brought a whole bag over there. He's telling me a little bit as well. Expecting a couple friends. So I said to him, "Can I pray for you before you go?" Thank you. So reading the scriptures. Curiosity through awareness to engagement to exchange. Being able to have a dialogue without becoming defensive. If you said that you believe in Jesus and that person is attacked in the discussion, so if someone is grown up with these, it's not a good time to say, oh, I read this. But it's important to get really comfortable. This is awesome. My wonderful grandson. Whoever sits beside me today when we're doing the role play, I told them, just work for it. This guy talks to him. It's going to be too easy for you when you get off it. Because that's one question. Offer opinions. But do not assume if someone's curiosity grows stronger that they're actually open to change. Change is the biggest threat. Move slowly and seek to provide more curiosity. Someone has a thimble full of curiosity, don't give them a pitcher full of answers. Jesus asked a lot of questions. He didn't give a lot of answers. Getting better at asking questions is a way of serving our friends. I'm going to give you a sheet here. You're going to have to fast track when you're doing this because you don't have a trusting relationship with the person that you're going to sit across from. You need to establish trust. So you don't just jump right into this. You had a spiritual experience. How are you? That's the permission. Typically, no. Okay, that's fine. Because God is the one that changes. We are just the vehicle being. So we've got some cool questions here that you might explore over the time when you have established trust with somebody. And be aware of what's happening in the news or in a movie. Say, oh, get this lesson. This is what was happening in Afghanistan. And rather than saying, oh, who's Taliban? So having so engaged. Parables. Jesus spoke a lot of parables. Some people are great storytellers. They will say, and they're using it in the world, they'll tell a parable just in their own words. What is telling us the story? Talk about this pearl of great price. This person gave up everything to find the pearl. Everyday parables. This is a little dated, but this guy was wrongly accused and spent 20 years in jail. And he chose not to be angry when he got out, but to move on. Lots of people are dealing with injustice and bitterness. How do you think he did that? How would you have responded? This is really getting closer to heart. You have to have trust, but to say, is there any people that you have the trouble forgiving? And you might self-disclose a little bit before that to say, man, I struggle with this. This happened to me, and I really struggle with that. It took me a long time. How about you? And I lead to the question. They say, well, how did you get rid of your bitterness? Well, Jesus taught me. This guy, have you ever seen it? This guy?
Yeah.
Born without legs and arms? Yeah. Chooses joy instead of despair. Golf, swims, being on a surfboard, inspirational speaker, has a married, beautiful woman, child. Nick, do this. Welcome. I'm Jose. Jose. Hi. So what do you see? Sounds good. Very nice. That's all right. Welcome. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, Okay, that's what I mean. Live curiously. Office, what did you do on the weekend? Oh, I went out and partied and I did this and I did this. On Saturday morning. That potentially. I learned how I could welcome people and develop trusting relationships. Changed my life. Curious. What did you do over the summer? I went on a missions trip. I went up to the Northwest Territories, or I went to Manila. Don't swear, don't judge. And porn. When you see people who have got computers open at the office or somewhere else, they've got all sorts of porn on there. Go away. Family over promotion, and become friends with Muslims. When Zulfi said, what do you think of when you hear the word Muslim? I think of Faisal, I think of Amal, Fuad, Pastor Imam, Fogre, I think of individuals. And it's great, they're wonderful, wonderful relationships. Well, I guess that means I need to sit down. Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor Mark. So a little bit more curiosity, going back to John chapter 4. You remember, how did Jesus raise curiosity? Do you remember the story? He said to the woman, can you give me water? And then he says, if you knew the water I had, I would give you living water. You wouldn't have to come back here all the time. So he raised her level of curiosity by introducing a thought that engaged her, because that was the need she had as well. So we're learning a little bit more on building trust by being vulnerable with a person, learning honestly, come to them as a learner, not as a teller, and then invite them into your life. So we're going to move ahead. Now, there are barriers. We talked about the cross-cultural barriers Jesus had, John chapter 4. You have barriers in your own culture. Pastor Joe is going to come up here vulnerably and tell you some of the barriers that we have in cultures, and then we're going to talk about crossing them.
Okay, before I share, I would like to ask some of you, maybe you can give me, what is your expectation? You maybe one or two can share, so I can listen instead of keep talking. And did you have any expectations today when you come? Just kidding. Okay, good. Thank you, Andy. So I think these questions are very good for opening, right? Or something like that. Anything else? Thank you, Andy. Anyone want to share? Welcome. You can come and sit in front. Okay, if no, then okay. And I try to take off my mask. I just want to say is if you are dropping the notes, then you don't need to do it because I'm going to print out and then give it to you. Maybe not today. I cannot promise today, but I will trying to, because this is only a workshop, maybe more on head knowledge, but we need to do some practice together. Maybe we can talk about how we can put it into practice. Today I'm going to share about the culture blocks. Let me just culture block. understand culture blocks, I don't want to block you from seeing that. So now, what is culture? What is culture? Actually, culture is something I would say is including behavior, core value, and belief. So our appearance, our behavior is only outward. It's some way, somehow reflect what we are inside. So, for example, punctuality, we need to be on time, right? Chinese people really focus on being on time because to respect other people and it's very important. And so the core value behind is time also is valuable to everyone. And versus if you talk to African people, they are not really punctual. Time. If you want to say start at 10 o'clock, they may come at 10:30 or 11 o'clock. It just come because they have other activities doing or they have other engagement at 10 o'clock. So that's why the core value is here and now is more important for them. But for us, it's promise. Time that we talk, make with our friend is important. We already agree a certain time that we should be on time. So that's why the culture is different from reflecting from behavior, but also as well as inside the belief, the core values, and also the belief. Example is one on time is always so respectful for Chinese people, but for the maybe for African is engaging here and now is more important than on time. What I am doing now is more important. And also if we reflect on the world will, if our world will could be everyone should be on time and something like that, then have to be late or something. But the other world will could be everyone has so there's different perspectives. So this could cause the cultural block. So when we talk about cultural block, we need to understand what culture first, right? So we need to pay attention not only the behavior, because what we can see is the behavior, but we need to think about what somehow it reflects. Maybe by asking questions and what they believe, what they think about the time concept or on time concept. So I also think about what causes culture block. It could be cultural differences, as I just mentioned to you, is about an African or Chinese, or maybe ethnicity superiority. For example, in Hong Kong, us from Hong Kong, maybe we will see people from, say, Manila, Philippines, or from Indonesia. They are most likely what were the occupations, right? They are just the Malay, right? And so maybe the boss look down the most of the time. So that's why there's ethnicity superiority. Then it will keep people away. It's not draw people together. On the contrast, cultural similarities could draw people together. So, do you like Chinese food?
I love it.
Oh, wow, wow. So food can bring us together, right? And it's very important that we are going to stay for, what culture we are going to today? Ecuadorian food today. Oh, okay. So we can, just, to have some similarity starting with food and what we like to eat or something like that, right? And we can share together. So how do we perceive people with different ethnic background? Our perspective: Philippines, Indian, Indonesia, Africa, Iran. Philippines, as I said, most of the Philippines they work overseas, right? They left the country and then they go to be a seaman or they to be a domestic servant at other countries. So we may look differently, right? To them, maybe Indian. Indian is when you think about Indian, what do you connect with Indian? Yes, yeah, you may, if depends. If you go into a house, an Indian house, maybe the smell, the scent is a little bit strong, right? So it also affects your what you look and how you feel, something like that, right? So Iran, just talk about some people from Iran, right? But I've been in North Vancouver and tried. I went to the supermarket. I've been there eating with friends, Persian restaurant, and also because I found out there's a lot of Iran Persians in North Vancouver. They also have their special um, culture. But in our heart, are we appreciate or we are more judgmental? Then we have to think about ourselves. So one thing is we can learn is uh, before because people from overseas come to Canada, it's multicultural, right? We are from different backgrounds or different um, cultural diversity in Canada. And I think we are kind of more able to accept people from different cultures, and I think this is good things. But at the same time, of course, there's some discrimination is happen, but it could happen anywhere. But what I'm saying is when we trying to connect with someone or uh, trying to acquaint with someone, do they feel accepted or do they feel rejected? Or they feel indifferent, you are not interested in him. So I'm going to share a story about just this guy is called James. James is working in a supermarket, and this is the second time I met him, which was yesterday. And the first time is I went to Safeway, a supermarket, to buy things, and then when I shop around, I heard somebody speak Cantonese. Then I'm interested to see who are they, and because the way they look, they carry an umbrella and they dress, the conversation. It seems to me they just newcomer from Hong Kong or from Asia. They speak Cantonese. Then I'm thinking about should I start conversation with them or something like how are they and just say a greeting. But I didn't do it. I just continue to shop around. But I pray and see how God guides me, and then maybe I should go back and to greet them. But when I go to greet them, they already gone. So by the time I left, I see that this guy, he works there. His name is James, and then I trying to talk to him. And I believe that this is the person that God want me to talk to. And then a short conversation, we already exchanged the phone number. So that's why I keep communicate with him. And then I said, "Oh, do you have time for coffee before you starting your shift?" Because he only go there once a week. It's close to my home, and he worked there only once a week from this branch. So I just but he didn't respond to me. I asked for coffee, but somehow he texted me back is, "Oh, I expected you come to the Safeway or something, right?" So I think maybe a different culture of things, right? But anyway, I went there yesterday, and he turned in just his because he worked afternoon shift, right? It was late, almost evening, and then he just buying the lunch there. And then he asked me, he know I'm a pastor. Can I buy you something? I said, "Oh, okay, thank you." I just say, I don't know whether I should accept it because his culture. If I turn him down, is it impolite? But in my culture, is I don't want somebody pay for me, especially he has 3 kids, right? Young kids at home, and they all from Sudan. Okay, and to make the story short is after his lunch finished because he ate his room inside. I think one of the rooms, the lunch room, and then he come out and we sit down together and a very short talk because only have half hour lunch. So and he starts sharing his story and he told me that he's missing his daughter. Something like that. I didn't I only see him only, this is the second time, but he discloses himself. I think because he feels I'm interested in him. I think not many people trying to say hi to a security guard, a black person, especially a Chinese guy, say hi to him. And at that point, he feel being interested. And that's why I think that we move the cultural block. And as Owen, right? Just share. We need to think about God bring those people here and start not changing him. Not I'm going to give him the good news. It's changing me. My perspective is God bringing him to Canada. God also brought me into Canada. What God expects me to do, right? So this is that type of things that motivate me to overcome the cultural block. So I think the first thing is we need to aware and admit our own feelings when approach someone in different ethnic people. Okay, when someone sitting beside you, a different culture people, how are you feeling? A stranger, you know. ¿Cómo está? Muy bien. Okay, so you can connect if you know what his culture, but they are friendly. But if you just look at the appearance, like a black person, they could be a security guard is very cool, and how you going to connect with him, So we need to first thing is we need to aware and admit. Aware is one thing. If we are aware but we don't admit, then we just deny the feelings. Then it's difficult to improve ourselves. We just we just deny. We have negative feelings, but we just keep away from him. So we need to aware and what kind of feelings when someone's sitting beside me or when I try to approach him. If I'm afraid as a Chinese, I'm afraid of being rejected, then I would ask, should I take it personal? No, if I don't take it personal, then it's okay. We can, move one step further. But if every time I'm, approach someone, I try to connect with someone, engage with someone, and I feel afraid of being rejected, then I won't do it. I don't want to start the conversation. I would just sit at the corner, right? So we know we've been working when I came in Canada in 1986. After I graduated from university, I start at courier company and then BCTEL. And I used to, in the lunchtime, I used to, just sit in the corner without engaging because our colleagues is from different cultures. But it got changed me, right? So I think we need to identify ourselves, who we are. We're not only a Christian, we are not only a parent, or we are only a son or daughter, but we also a cross-cultural worker. We identify ourselves. We have a mission and an identity is we are a cross-cultural worker. We want to start the conversation. I don't want to be, change my own cultures into his or her own culture. I'm not going to change myself. But my goal is to connect with him somehow. I can bridge with him so that we can talk, we can connect. Not because I want to change myself into a different nationalities or ethnic groups, not want to change him or herself too, but I want to imitate Jesus. He just, be a person and trying to experience all kind of sufferings to identify with human beings. So I think this is important is we need to show interest to one's culture. And I think they're good questions from Pastor Mark. So I don't want to repeat, but something their history or culture or something like that is. So finally, I would say connect with them gradually. So one step at a time. we can do some research, study the culture. So I just put Sudan in Google, right? And then I found out that the people of Sudan or Sudanese, and they are hardworking, just like the Chinese, and they just don't want to express themselves. They are so difficult or something like that. They so they study the culture first, and then social with them. Okay, and that's why I say maybe this class can give us some ideas how to connect with people from different cultures, but we need to practice. We need to try different food. Just like me, I didn't try a lot of food. I didn't try Indian, but lately I tried the Persian food. I went to the North Vancouver because my home is very close to North Vancouver, and then try different kind of food. Go to the shopping, like the supermarket place, and to understand their culture and mingle with them, talk to them, and so genuine empathy at the right time. So, this guy is going to come to Faith Baptist Church coming Sunday, not tomorrow, next Sunday, because I'm preaching in this church next Sunday. And he said he's going to bring his family and bring his friends to join the Sunday service. I think it's very important to make cross-culture connection in our daily lives. Otherwise, we just have some head knowledge, and then when we go home, when we go back to our own company or school, then we will be normal at the time. So okay, this is what I sharing.
Thank you, Pastor Joe. Now, Zolfi, do you have any more? Do you have another little section you want to share? So Zolfi's going to come and share a little bit about his culture, things about his culture. But be aware of the culture blocks. When Zolfi gets done, you're going to sit in trios with someone from a different culture and get to practice some of the things you're learning. Questions, the trust, the curiosity, all that. So we found that last time I highlighted for you. We want to do it again for those of you who are new. But Zolfi just going to come and just share from his cultural perspective, what are the things that might be blocks to you, but what are things you need to know so that you can cross cultural barriers and connect better? Come on.
Thank you. Yeah, so I think the main thing we just talked about is always happening. So for my family, we're Muslim. Family's Muslim. But our sect of Islam, it's kind of like Islam also has a sect. So our sect of Islam believes very different things than. So if you go and research at home, Muslims believe this family. So I think it's really important when we're engaging with people to ask them what do they believe, right? And maybe I haven't done lots of research on this, I don't know what to know. But I can go ask people like, what do you believe about God? What do you believe about? And actually, when they explain themselves, know where they stand. Because my friends in my family, they're actually and do all the things to be Muslim, but it's completely. So when you start asking them questions, you find that out. So in my family, my mom, she grew up, she was actually quite religious. She was like, okay, whenever they have prayers, so like our denomination, it was. So for her, every time it's prayer time, she will gather all of her friends. She's a kid. She'll gather all of her friends and make them pray together. So she was always looking for God. And there was a few times that the biggest part of her life where she was because she was actually searching. She felt like about God in Islam, God is very far away from them. right? And so they feel like they're praying, but they don't feel he'll ever talk to them. They don't feel like he actually cares very much. And everything they're doing is actually because they feel like if they don't do good enough, then God's actually going to punish them. So everything they're doing is trying to be good enough that God will, right? So for her, after her father passed away, so she started searching and in her community, she didn't get the answers she was looking for, so she started looking through different religions, looking through Hinduism, Buddhism, and it wasn't actually until she met a friend at the swimming lesson. And that friend, she just asked her straight up, she's like, so what do you think happens this after? She hasn't met the person. But through that conversation, actually led on a path. It's a long way, I won't go into that. But just the fact is that when you're intentional about the person, a lot of those cultural barriers actually dissolve. Suddenly realize, oh, they're actually believe a lot of similar things, and we have a lot of commonalities, right? So I guess for Muslims in general, a big thing when you're talking to Muslims is that they don't believe in, they don't believe Jesus. That's in their holy book. They have mention of Jesus, but they don't believe he's God. Right? So it's very hard for them to say, oh, God is a man. Right? And if you think about it in the Bible, the Jews at Jesus' time felt the same way, right? They were all saying, like, how can you say that you're a man? You can't. So it's actually really parallels between them. But a big thing that does work with Muslim culture is experience of God. And because in Islam, there's 99 things they have, but they don't have the word describing it. Like he's merciful, he's just, all these things. There's 99 names, but they don't have a word for father, and they don't have the word love. So just imagine what would it be like to believe in a God who's not and he's not. Right? It really changes how you view God. So many times, like when I was in Afghanistan, we shared this story. And obviously in Afghanistan, you have to be careful, so we can't be like very outward preaching. But we just shared this simple story, a parable Jesus showed. And at the end, when we talked about the father, how he ran out to meet his son, they start crying and crying and crying because they can really relate to Jesus' culture at that time, right? The father is very proud, he never stooped down, and the son is like a terrible son, he should be killed, right? But when the father went and ran out to meet them, they were so touched and they started crying. And even for my family, like my mom, the biggest thing that touched me was that God knew her and that he loved her. Right? So I think a lot of times when we're reaching out to people from different backgrounds, just sharing our own stories of encounters with them. A lot of my Afghan friends, they're scared that I'm trying to convert them. Because actually, when they leave Afghanistan, people told them, when you go to Canada, people are going to try and convert you. It'll be nice to you if they want to convert you. So they're very hesitant and they don't want to talk sometimes. But I told them very straight up, you know what? I'm not trying to convert you. I can't convert you. Only God can convert you. So that's not my job, and I don't want to do that. But I want to share with you what I found a real relationship and experience. Have you experienced and some of the people that you experienced? Like, they're like, oh, I guess. So I'm like, what would it be like if you could? So I think it's those little things. Again, just through the conversation. When I met with Ryan, this the startup, I met up with him. We talked for like 4 hours, and then we met up again and talked for another 5 hours. And in the second time meeting him, we ended up talking about the gospel for 2.5 hours. Oh. And he said, oh, I've never heard anything about that. Actually, I've always been kind of curious about what I don't know anything about. And so we just started talking. At the end of the conversation, he said, you know, it really changed my thinking. I never thought about religion. Or I thought they were kind of similar, but now I see a lot of sense too. Right? So it's very simple. We just engaging with them, and it overcomes so many of those cultural blocks just by interacting and sharing our stories. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, now the moment of truth. I would like you to take your chair, the chair up where you are sitting, take it with you, and one of our guests is going to come and join. So two of you need to go together. You can, any combination, will put you up in about 10, 15 minutes. So you'll get a couple of conversations. After you've had a couple of conversations, we'll take time for a question and answer time so that you can debrief some of the things you've been thinking and experiencing. Then we're going to have our Ecuadorian lunch. We'll have a picnic lunch, plantains and shrimp and other things. Put shrimp in there, something you recognize. But anyway, you'll enjoy it. It's good food. So come next door. Bring your chair with you.